Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Konrad Gorlinski. Angela Merkel is paying a farewell visit to Poland. It is the last time she'll visit us during her tenure as Chancellor. As Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki stressed, one of the elements of the meeting was a summary of Merkel's activities during her 16 years in office. During the meeting in Warsaw's Royal Łazienki Park, politicians discussed such issues as the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and the protection of the European Union's external borders. Other topics included the current situation in the East, as well as EU climate policy. Protecting the borders of the European Union, preventing the effects of the pandemic, the issue of climate policy, or the current situation in Afghanistan. These are just some of the topics discussed during today's meeting between Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki and German Chancellor Angela Merkel. We talked a lot about the international environment and security. We are well aware that the situation has changed dramatically in the last few weeks in connection with the departure from Afghanistan. The recently completed Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline has cast a shadow on the meeting, however. Poland considers it damaging to the country's security. Our ultimate goal for Ukraine is to continue to be a transit country for Russian gas after the expiry of the agreement in 2024. Angela Merkel lied when she said that the transit of Russian gas through Ukraine would continue. That does not depend on Angela Merkel, but on Vladimir Putin. This is Angela Merkel's last official visit to Poland as head of the German government. And now that Joe Biden isn't objecting to building a European superstate, I would say that we are dealing with Brussels' legal and financial aggression, as well as ideological aggression, because it is precisely the ideology of gender that is being used in this attack on the Polish government and local government. Originally, the German Chancellor also planned to meet with President Andrzej Duda, but the German failed to inform the Polish president's chancellery. Polish diplomats considered it a faux pas and declined to change President Andrzej Duda's schedule. The Germans are trying to conduct such a policy of supremacy towards Poland. Angela Merkel's visit to Poland can be read as part of a series of farewell tours to capitals important to Berlin. So far, the outgoing German Chancellor has visited London, Washington, Moscow, and Kiev. Israel and Paris are still on the agenda. In Dąbrowa Górnicza, President Andrzej Duda took part in celebrations marking the 41st anniversary of the signing of the Katowice Agreement and the creation of the independent self-governing trade union Solidarity. During the ceremony, the president took the opportunity to award national decorations.
Powstał jeden samorządny związek zawodowy Solidarność.
A single, self-governing trade union, Solidarność, was created, bringing together 10 million Poles. It is probably the largest such social movement in the history of the world. That was the essence of that change, but the strikers made it more specific here. There were 4 great agreements, from the Szczecin Agreement to the Gdansk Agreement, the Jastrzębs Agreement, and finally the one we remember today, the Dąbrowa Górnicza Agreement. This last one ties these 4 together and leads to the creation of the Solidarity Trade Union as a single social movement uniting Polish workers. Health professionals are demanding an increase in the lowest wages. The long-prepared protest began today, with protesters setting up tents in front of the Prime Minister's office. According to the Ministry of Health, the government has no money to meet these demands. Nevertheless, there is no sign of a compromise. And Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński is one of the most important Polish figures of the second half of the 20th century. As head of the Catholic Church in Poland, he symbolized opposition to communist rule. He made no concessions to the authorities, who imprisoned him for 3 years. The so-called uncrowned King of Poland will be beatified on Sunday, together with Elżbieta Różaczewska, the founder of the Society for the Care of the Blind in Laski, near Warsaw. The Museum of the Archdiocese of Warsaw opened an exhibition titled Winner, Primate for the Church and Homeland. Polish Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński, a towering figure of Polish religious freedom who was persecuted by communist authorities during the Cold War, is to be beatified in Warsaw on Sunday. Beatification is one of the final steps in the process that can lead to sainthood. Mother Elżbieta Różaczewska, founder of the Franciscan Sisters Servants of the Cross, is to be beatified alongside Cardinal Wyszyński. The revered icon of his country's resistance to communism spent 3 years in prison or under house arrest in the early 1950s during repression of religion by the authorities. In 2019, the Vatican approved a decree recognizing a miracle attributed to Wyszyński, who died in 1981 and was very close to Pope John Paul II, also a Pole. Most Poles had no chance to meet Primate Stefan Wyszyński, and the great works of his life are overshadowed by the sensational pontificate of John Paul II. If young people today are interested in the history of this period, it is above all in the figure of the later Pope, Karol Wojtyła. In the exhibition devoted to Wyszyński, you will find objects that were present when he lived and worked here. We even have his passport, with which he was sent to the Second Vatican Council. And finally, the main anniversary celebrations of the attacks on the World Trade Center began in New York today. A ceremony in tribute to the nearly 3,000 victims of the attacks was underway at the site where the two towers once stood. President Joe Biden and the First Lady also took part in the ceremony. 20 years after hijacked airliners smashed into New York City's World Trade Center and the Pentagon outside Washington, Americans came together today to honor the nearly 3,000 lives lost on September 11, 2001, and reflect on how the attacks have shaped the country's view of the world and itself. With President Joe Biden on hand, the ceremony at the September 11th Memorial in Lower Manhattan began with a moment of silence at 8:46 a.m., the exact time the first of two planes flew into the World Trade Center's Twin Towers. Relatives then began to read aloud the names of the 2,977 victims to the thousands who had gathered on the cool, clear morning, among them former President Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, New York's junior senator at the time of the attacks. The remembrances have become an annual tradition, but today has special significance, coming 20 years after the morning that many view as a turning point in U.S. history, a day that gave Americans a sense of vulnerability that has deeply influenced the country's political life since then. In a painful reminder of those changes, only weeks ago, U.S. and allied forces completed a chaotic withdrawal from the war the United States started in Afghanistan in retaliation for the attacks, which became the longest war in U.S. history. At sunset, 88 powerful light bulbs will project twin beams 4 miles into the sky to mirror the fallen towers. This year, buildings throughout Manhattan, including the Empire State Building and the Metropolitan Opera, will join the commemoration by illuminating their facades in blue. And Bruce Springsteen sang "I'll See You in My Dreams" at the 20th anniversary ceremony. With an acoustic guitar and harmonica, Springsteen performed his song before an audience of family members of those who lost their lives in the 9/11 attacks, as well as dignitaries. In New York City, on a clear, beautiful day similar to the weather 20 years ago, relatives read a list of the people who died at the towers. Biden, head bowed, did not make remarks. Rudy Giuliani, who was the mayor of New York at the time of the attacks, also attended the ceremony. As always, thanks for tuning in this evening, and I hope you have a lovely Saturday night.